So Thursday sees Manchester United travel to Istanbul in the Europa League to come face to face with Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce. Obviously Mourinho, former Man United manager, didn't leave Old Trafford on the best of terms. He hasn't had the best of starts in Turkey. His side currently sit fourth in the table after 8 games, 8 points off top spot, albeit with a game in hand on leaders Galatasaray, their big Istanbul rivals. Now, Rob, ahead of this game, you went to Istanbul recently to watch the Intercontinental Derby, the game where East meets West, Asia meets Europe, to find out a little bit more about how Jose's been taken in Istanbul. What was the atmosphere like, and what's the situation with Jose?
Well, I mean, first off, he's still the same. You just mentioned there that Fenerbahce Galatasaray game is one of the most heated rivalries in world football. It doesn't need a lot to set it off. Everyone else in Turkey ahead of the game seemed really intent on trying to calm things down, and then Jose's in the media the week before saying that Turkish referees favour Galatasaray and that Victor Osimhen dives too much and that referees should watch out for it during the game. Really just intent on pouring petrol on the flames, really, and in that kind of typical Jose style. Aside from that, I mean, the Fenerbahce are obviously delighted that he's there. He's still got that status, that aura that we all know from covering the Premier League. The problem really is that he just hasn't got the tools and the players that he once had. Those great teams that he had at Chelsea, Real Madrid, Inter Milan were full of really top class players. And really, for Jose to move to Turkey is a massive step down for him. I wouldn't call it kind of a footballing backwater, but it's close. In terms of the way that UEFA rank leagues, Turkey is 10th, behind the Czech Republic and Belgium. They haven't got a representative in this season's Champions League phase. This really is Jose at the kind of the bottom of the ladder. Really, I think he's hoping that he can kind of drag Fenerbahce to the Turkish title. It's obviously one of two teams who can probably win it, so there is a chance that he can do that, get back in the Champions League, and maybe just add a bit more shine to his reputation, and hope that results in another step back up into one of Europe's top 5 leagues. But you just alluded to there that his start of Fenerbahce has been okay. It's not been fantastic. The Galatasaray game really was a massive setback. A lot of Fenerbahce's fans saw that game as an early opportunity for Mourinho really to show that he's still got his Midas touch and he can take Fenerbahce above Galatasaray and win the title. And really, they were played off the park for most of the game. They were 2-0 down inside 30 minutes, lost 3-1. It was interesting. A lot of Fenerbahce fans, walking away from the stadium that night, were really in a little bit of a sense of disbelief. They really didn't see that coming with Mourinho as their manager. It's a shame, really. I think Mourinho, he has still got that status, and it's a little bit sad is possibly the wrong word, but to see him at Fenerbahce trying to kind of like scrabble around for results and trying to just sort of maintain that aura that he's always had. Obviously, that Man United game is a chance for him to show that he's still got it in the big games. And it's interesting, you speak to people around Man United that even though they should beat Fenerbahce really comfortably, given the players they've got, they still know that it's Jose. He's got that touch in big games. There is still a little bit of a worry about what he's going to say about Man United in the pre-match press conference. So he has still got that something. It's just that he's having to start again in a league that perhaps he thinks he's too big for.
I mean, he's 61 now, and I think his last 4 jobs, so you've got Roma, United, Chelsea, and probably Real Madrid. I think they all, and Tottenham obviously as well, ended with the sack. And I think, progressively each job got worse in the sense that he didn't deliver anything tangible apart from 2 trophies at United in 2017. So, we all remember Jose arriving at Chelsea. It's 20 years ago. The special one was 20 years ago, and he looks like he's, he had that great charisma at the time, and he was the future, wasn't he? Until Pep Guardiola came along, and then somebody wants, he was the future once, and it was Pep. And I think Jose didn't really move with the times that Pep did, and this new wave of managers came along and coaches that followed the Pep route with progressive football from the back, and Jose stuck to his old kind of way of playing. But I do wonder at times where you look at Carlo Ancelotti. He was at Everton 3-4 years ago, and again seemingly Napoli, Everton, seemingly kind of on the way down. Then he just got his route back to Real Madrid, and all of a sudden he's Carlo Ancelotti again. He's winning Champions Leagues again. For what about from both of you, I mean, James, you work with Jose, I guess, at Chelsea and at Tottenham and Robert United. Does he have that in him to be Jose again at a big club, or is it gone now? Is he now just kind of going progressively down the chain of clubs, or does he have a Carlo Ancelotti job still in him?
I don't think so. I don't see a route back to the top for Mourinho from this position, just simply because I think he's too set in his ways, and really his ways have become when he was at the vanguard really of football, as you say, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Now it just feels as though his methods are a bit antiquated. I mean, you mentioned Tottenham. I have it on fairly good authority that had it not been for COVID, Mourinho probably would have been sacked long before he actually was, because obviously when COVID came in 2020 and sort of shut football down for a few months, Spurs were in a bad place. They were struggling. They'd lost a lot of players to injuries, and the mood in the camp was really, really bad. But obviously, COVID was something that none of us had experienced before. It was sort of a reset for everybody, and clearly it just shifted everyone's focus away from football to life and death and much more important things than that. So he had time then to kind of sort of reframe, reset, get those players back fit, and then in Project Restart, Spurs actually looked pretty good because they'd got those players available. And also, of course, because the fans weren't allowed back in the stadium, they weren't really able to voice the discontent at the football, because the football was terrible. It was really turgid. It was defensive, and it was solely reliant on Harry Kane and Heung-min Son being absolutely deadly clinical. Like, I can remember that the numbers around that time, that Kane and Son in particular were just outperforming their XG and their XA. It was ludicrous. It was unsustainable, and as it ultimately proved. But there was a time when Spurs looked very, very good under Mourinho, and it was because they were well drilled, they were defensive, and then Kane and Son, or both, one or the other, took their chance and they won a game 1-0, 2-0. And those two were just combining in that way that we know that they can do, and they did for so many years at Spurs. But ultimately, it was this shtick, and as soon as that ran out, as soon as there were issues with it, as soon as the fans got back in the stadium and started to realise actually this isn't great to watch, and really the only thing to recommend him is winning, and when it's not there, it's very difficult to engender any faith in him, I think.
I mean, Rob, just going back to his time at United, when he left, somebody told me at the club that Solskjaer coming in was the anti-venom, because it ended so badly under Mourinho that he had no allies left. The players had lost faith in him. The coach had lost faith in that. Certainly people above him, the Ed Woodward and the directors had run out of patience with him. And it was kind of prolonged end, wasn't it? I mean, remember the summer tour, I think, whatever year it was, it seems 2018. I think that it was toxic. And I think that's what happens with Jose towards the end, isn't it? Wherever he is, it just gets messy, it gets nasty, and you can kind of trace a Mourinho managerial kind of reign with starts well, people start talking about what a great character he is, they get organised, and then it gets nasty. He falls out with players, he falls out with the owners, and as you said before, Fenerbahce in Turkey, it's volatile, and you can see the same happening again, just on a much quicker scenario.
You can, and also, I mean, you can already see. I mean, he's only been there a couple of months. The pattern is already there. He comes in, and his big charm offensive. He calls it. Fenerbahce, the biggest sports club in the world. He says that my skin is now your skin. All these really, these quotes that go everywhere across on printed on scarves and posters and things, and then it just starts to slowly crack. And James is right that you can kind of live with it all when they're winning, but when the winning goes away, then there's not very much left. The one thing I would say about Fenerbahce that maybe he's found a little bit of a fit there is that I can remember at United, and I'm sure the same happened at Chelsea and Spurs, is that the clubs become worried about what he's going to say in press conferences. That he becomes more and more volatile, and it becomes a really big issue. It certainly was for Man United by the end. If anything, at Fenerbahce, it's the exact opposite. They, as a club, they feel very, very hard done by all the time. They feel that the authorities are against them. They feel that referees are against them. Everyone in Turkey hates them. And it was funny that you walk into the club shop at Fenerbahce, and there's a video of Mourinho running on a loop, and it's just all clips from throughout his career. And you would think that it would all be clips of him lifting all these trophies that he's won, 2 Champions Leagues, league titles in 4 different countries, and it's not. It's basically clips of him being volatile at all these different clubs. It's smashing water bottles on the touchline at Man United. It's poking Barcelona when he ran onto the pitch at the Nou Camp with Inter Milan. All these kind of really hostile clips put together. And there was someone in the club shop and said that they don't really care about what he's won in the past. They care about him being this great defender of Fenerbahce, to come out and be the one to kind of speak up on behalf of the club against the authorities. They quite like that. So in terms of that respect, I think that he's probably found quite a good fit at Fenerbahce. The problem is, though, that only works when you're winning. And if you're not winning, you're not left with very much. And it's very, very easy then to see the bad side of Mourinho, and you end up having to sack him, which is what's happened at all these former clubs.
Do you get a sense that this United game is a big deal to Fenerbahce? Because I know United have got a terrible record in Turkey. I think they've lost at Galatasaray in the past. They've lost to I think Istanbul Besiktas here a few years ago with a terrible defending, I think, and they've lost at Fenerbahce as well. So they don't have a great track record there. Is this a game where Fenerbahce are looking at United as being a real kind of team to beat, or have United faded a little bit? It's not a Champions League game. Is it just not another game, but is it a game that doesn't really have the same resonance as it would have done maybe 5 or 6 years ago?
I think it's important for Jose. I think already, even when I was there a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about Man United visiting. They've started all right in the Europa League. They've drawn their 2 games. I think Jose obviously still thinks he's a Champions League manager. He's been very, very quick to tell Fenerbahce, though, that they are a Europa League team. Again, this typical kind of Mourinho put down of his own team and his own players. I think Mourinho, though, will be looking at it as a chance to show everyone that he's still got it. He's going to be absolutely licking his lips at that press conference beforehand to stick the boot into Man United, stick the boot into Erik ten Hag. That famous press conference rant about football heritage at United aren't at the level they think they are. All of that's been proved right in the intervening years. He'll be very, very quick to tell everyone that. And then you've got a game, you're right, it's an awkward place for Man United to go against a team they should be beating, but it'll be a really hostile atmosphere because it always is in Turkey. Jose will be absolutely loving all this. And the thought of him being able to put another nail in Erik ten Hag's coffin, he'll have been thinking about that for weeks. We know exactly what he's like, don't we?
James, just ask you on this. I mean, we've seen a certain kind of bit of a swing back to big name coaches taking international jobs. Thomas Tuchel's taken one. Mauricio Pochettino's taken the USA job. We've seen Julian Nagelsmann staying with the German job. Is that perhaps his next role for Jose? Portugal maybe, or another international team. The World Cup in 2026 is going to be massive in the US. Can you see Jose Mourinho being a coach at the World Cup in 26?
Yeah, I mean, I think Portugal's long been mooted as the probable, well, maybe not final destination, but certainly one of the few remaining stops in his managerial career. I mean, I would imagine he would like to manage England as well, given how good the talent pool is there, and obviously the experience he's got in English football and the fact that he likes it here so much. But the thing is, as a tournament coach, you can still see him having success, because I think for him, for the sort of Mourinho shtick to work, it is very much a short-term thing, isn't it? And you could see him with the right group of players, the right fit at the right time, getting everyone together, fostering that kind of siege mentality in a camp for a month, and getting through a tournament, with everyone on board and everyone together. But I think what we've sort of seen at club level is that the kind of rule breaking and histrionics and the sort of media outbursts and all these sort of things, and even the way he treats the players and how he can drop players from week to week and not communicate with some, and lean heavily on others. It just doesn't really wash anymore in terms of, if you look at where management's gone now, and even style of football as well, it's evolved beyond the kind of the siege mentality and us against the world to being more about being progressive, about being more inclusive, really, and that goes from wanting the ball and trying to dominate teams with possession-based style, through to trying to be more of a sort of collegiate environment where everybody contributes, and it's a squad game. We sort of hear that all the time. Arteta at Arsenal always talks about finishers, where he wants players off the bench who are maybe not involved but need to be ready to come and play 15, 20 minutes. Mourinho sort of at his best was always, he's got a core of 15 or 16, 17 at most, really, and those are the players he uses, and the rest of them, can go and wait in the car park really until January, and then they can leave. It's that kind of mentality. Whereas obviously at an international level, he would pick his squad, that would be the squad, and they would go, and you could sort of see it. I mean, just off on a slight tangent, I'm just reminded of a great story I heard about Mourinho when he was in charge at Tottenham, just on the sort of rule breaking thing. That during COVID, the Premier League managers' meetings had to be on Zoom, because obviously they couldn't get everybody in the room. But even during COVID, you still had, this was a period where social distancing was in effect, and you had to have 2 meters from the next person in the room. And so most of the managers' meetings were taking place, as I say, over Zoom, with every manager on his own in the call. And that was kind of the Premier League rule at the time was, you're going to be on your own in this room because presumably you're going to be in your office and it's not big enough to have someone else in it. And they were all setting up on the Zoom call one day, and Mourinho comes online, and they say to him, "So you following social distancing guidelines?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am, yeah." But what he doesn't realise is that he's not set his camera up properly, and the arm of his assistant is in the shot, so everyone else can see that he's not following the rules. And Mourinho's there going, yeah. No, there's no one else in here. No, it's absolutely fine. So he's still got this kind of mischievous streak in him about, and there's always this thing at Spurs where he took the players up onto the park to kind of train them publicly, and they got papped, and there was a lot of criticism about them breaking lockdown rules at the time and this kind of thing. So that can endear Mourinho to certain people, but it just feels as though the sort of mischievous side of it has kind of bled into more of a sort of, I don't know, he comes across as a bit of an angry guy, doesn't he, a lot of the time now, as if he's sort of railing against the world and that he's just frustrated about how the game has evolved, and perhaps how he feels he doesn't quite get the respect that he deserves, because of course he was a phenomenally successful manager back in the day, and I think even at Chelsea, when everybody sort of loved to hate him in that first stint, I think there would have been a lot of opposing fans who would have thought, you know what, if he was ours, we'd love him. He's that kind of guy. But it just, I don't know, it just feels like the game's moved on. But there could be a place for him at international level.
I mean, international, I must admit, I do think if Jose had been in charge of England at the Euros, that would he have had a plan? I think he would have had more of a plan in the bigger games to obviously Gareth Southgate got into the final, but whether Jose would have had that extra bit of tactical nous in the final, I mean, who knows? But in terms of Portugal, I mean, the Ronaldo question is a big one, because he doesn't have a great relationship with Ronaldo, or Ronaldo doesn't have a great relationship with Mourinho, whichever way you want to spin it. I was told a story about when United played Juventus in Turin a few years ago, and Ronaldo was playing for Juventus at the time. Jose was United manager. There was a tunnel bust-up which involved Ronaldo being not too complimentary about Mourinho and his credentials to manage Man United. So they've had a checkered relationship. So I guess the Portugal scenario is when Ronaldo's off the scene, Jose would probably enter it. I think it'd be very difficult for Jose to take on Portugal and be the guy that, kills Bambi almost. It basically says, Ronaldo, your time is up. So, but then he might relish that. He might relish being the guy that puts Ronaldo out of his international career. But it'd take a big man, and Jose is that. But yeah, I just think, wrapping up on Jose, Fenerbahce, big game against United. We all think that this could be, progressively worse. After Fenerbahce, it's going to be either international management or Saudi Arabia, or it's not going to be back at Real Madrid, or it's not going to be back at Man United. It's going to be a job that he probably wouldn't have decided he wanted a job in 5-6 years ago.